Hello everybody, my name is Enoch, and this is the first of what I hope to be many The Making of videos, where I show you the steps I took to make a game. This video, as the title may suggest, is about my entry to Ludum Dare 44, Tooth, Claw, and Teacup. As you may know, since you are watching this video, Ludum Dare 44 was last weekend. To those of you that don't know, Ludum Dare is a game-making competition, or game jam, hosted every 4 months, given around a specific theme, and within a certain time frame, 48 hours or 72 hours. If you want more information, I'll put the link down below to the Ludum Dare website, so you can go check that out. The theme for this jam was Real Life is Currency, and I was really excited for this because this was one of the themes I was hoping for. I immediately got to work on creating a game idea, and after spending around 2 hours throwing ideas at myself, I finally settled on the concept of a top-down shooter where you go around smashing monsters with a teacup, and minus the shooter bit. I was now done with the planning phase. With this game idea and some sketches, I went to my computer and opened up Inkscape, where I spent around an hour creating the main character, only to trash it because I didn't like how it looked. I ended up moving to Procreate, where I created the main character, the monster, and the tree, all within the time it took me to create that single main character in Inkscape. It was definitely an improvement in the art. This was the character I created in Inkscape, and this is the character I created in Procreate. As you can see, there are major differences in how they look. I still did use Inkscape to create all the other art assets, like the ground, the water, and the UI and stuff like that. After creating the few basic assets, I moved into Unity and started putting everything together, starting with the player, who I literally had to put together because I had exported him as different pieces so that I could animate it easier within Unity. I prefer to animate within Unity because it's a lot quicker and a lot more effective, and I really like the Unity animation flow. After putting him together and animating him, I started working on the player controller. This is where I ran into my first issue. The controls were slow to respond, and unless I set the speed to somewhere in the hundreds, the player would only crawl across the screen. I fixed this by using rigid body that move position instead of rigid body that move velocity to move my character. As you can see, the player started moving a lot faster, and the controls were much more responsive, which gave for smoother gameplay. Once the controls were to my satisfaction, I began working on making sure the camera would follow the player wherever it went. This was pretty easy to implement. I just had to set the camera position to the player position. I then started placing trees to create a more interesting environment for the player to move around in. Once that was done, I started working on the enemy, who, like the player, had to be put together because I had exported him in different pieces to animate. This is definitely the most relaxing and easy part of making a game, just getting it set up, animating the characters, putting them together, and all that stuff. Moving to Visual Studio, I started programming the AI, which was a lot easier than I had feared. It was mind-blowingly simple. It didn't take long to get the enemy to start chasing the player across the screen. Now I was faced with the task of something that would end up being the biggest problem throughout the entire development of this game: spawning the enemies. There are 2 ways to spawn objects in Unity. Okay, that's not true, there are probably a lot more, but these are like the 2 main ways: object pooling and just instantiating it. Instantiating is when you create the object in-game. Object pooling, on the other hand, is when you preload a group or pool of objects off-screen, and when you need that object, you draw from that pool instead of creating that object on the spot. While instantiating is a lot simpler, object pooling is a lot better on the computer because instantiating objects all the time will cause your game to lag. I originally planned to use object pooling for Tooth, Claw, and Teacup, but it caused more problems than I thought was worth dealing with for a jam game, so I ended up using instantiate. I spent the next day working on effects for the enemy, like the death particle effect and flashing when the enemy is hit. Getting the enemy to flash caused me some difficulty because at first I couldn't figure out how to get all the different pieces to flash. What I ended up doing was using a for loop to cycle through the pieces, then setting the active to false, and then setting it to true again, giving the flash effect. As you can see, that worked just fine, giving a nice flash effect for when the enemy took damage. I then created the HUD by creating a canvas and placing text objects, which would end up being the health indicator, the enemy indicator, and the timer. It didn't take that long to get the text objects to display the health/currency or the enemy count. I also created a wave indicator to show when a new wave starts. Moving back to Inkscape, I started creating the buttons for the upgrade screen and the game over screen. I tend to do this stuff last because for me it's a good mile marker to say you're almost done or you're halfway there. I realized that I had no sprite for the water, and it can't be an island if there's no water surrounding it, so I started creating the water sprite, which would end up being two pieces, the top piece being the waves and the bottom being a gradient with some cloud-like objects to give it a more organic feeling. This was really fun to make and also pretty simple to animate since I just edited the scale of the waves, giving it the appearance of moving water. Bringing it all back into Unity, I created the upgrade screen and also created a cool little game over effect that fades in when you die. Moving back into Visual Studio, I made sure that the upgrade screen would actually show up when you complete a wave and would actually do stuff when you click on the buttons. That done, I was pretty much finished with the gameplay. All I had left to do was work on the menu and tutorial scene and the options scene, which I ended up scrapping because I didn't have enough time to do the options. This is the finished product. As you can see, all the buttons had animations, and even the teacup had an animation when you hovered over it. I had only one last thing to do, making sound effects. For this project, I had never made sound effects. For previous games, I would download the sound effects off the web, but since I wanted to enter the compo, I needed to make my own sound effects. So I locked myself in my room and started making noises with my mouth and any inanimate objects that came to hand. This was surprisingly really fun to do, and I plan on doing it for future games. Choosing the sound effects I liked, I moved them to Audacity where I started editing them so they would no longer sound like they were made by my mouth, which, well, most of them were. After importing all the fully edited sound effects to Unity and making sure they played at the right moments, I was finally finished with my game. It was now time to export. Thinking I was done, I built the game and decided to play the built game to see how everything looked. I'm glad I did because when I checked the game, I found the tutorial was all out of whack because I forgot to set the canvas to scale with pixel size. So I had to go back to Unity and fix that. I then built it again and discovered that I forgot to add an exit button. So I had to go back into Unity, add an exit button, and then built it again for the last and final time. I was now officially done with Tooth, Claw, and Teacup. So, zipping it all up, I brought it over to itch.io, uploaded to that, then got the link from the itch.io page and brought it to Ludum Dare, created the page for that, and I was done. I had done it. I completed my first Ludum Dare game jam and made my first game in Unity. Whoa! Wow, some of you actually made it to the end. Thanks for watching. If you want to check out Tooth, Claw, and Teacup, I'll put the link in the description to the Ludum Dare page where you can play it. If you enjoyed this video and like the content, please like and subscribe. Bye!